Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the last session of our 2025 First Responders Wellbeing and First Responder and Veteran Wellbeing Summit. My name's Donna, and I'm on the board of directors of Wellbeing Australia. Thanks so much for joining us today in this last session, and it promises to really be, I think, a really important summary of some important conversations and valuable sharing and learning over the week. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we meet from today. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and wish to welcome warmly all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us today. We recognise your enduring connection to land, water, culture, and community, and honour your contribution across generations. Just a couple of notes before we get underway today, and I hand over to Rosemary. Firstly, today's session is being recorded, and this recording will be made available to all of you in the coming days on our websites. Secondly, Rosemary has kindly agreed to leave some time to take some questions at the end. So please, if you'd like to pose a question to Rosemary, there is a Q&A button on your Zoom panel. And if you wouldn't mind putting a question in there, if you have one for Rosemary. Thirdly, we'd love your feedback. So at the end of this session, as you're logging off, you'll see a quick questionnaire, which should take about a minute or two to complete. If you wouldn't mind taking the time, we really do like to improve and know what worked for you, what you liked, and what was less favorable. And then finally, we've also created a series of tools and resources for you that will build on this week's discussions and activities. And the first one will be emailed to you next week. So please take a moment and add Wellbeing Australia to your contact list, and keep an eye on both your inbox and potentially your junk folder in case it happens to land there. Wonderful. Well, let's get started. It is with absolute pleasure that I welcome Rosemary Hegner. Rosemary is a remarkable woman, a career paramedic, a clinician, an educator, an emergency manager, former executive leader, and now a passionate cabinet maker. In this closing session, The Lighthouse, Rosemary reflects on the themes of identity, purpose, and transition that were shared throughout the summit, drawing on these themes, insights, and inspirations. With wisdom and lived experience, she reminds us that even when our roles may change, our purpose can still be a guiding light for the way forward. All right, now, what I'll do, Rosemary, we do have there we go. Perfect. Over to you, Rosemary.
Yep. Okay, lovely. Thanks, Donna, and thank you for the opportunity to come and speak. It's actually a privilege to be here, and today I'm coming to you from the beautiful land of the Ngunnawal people. It's cold in the snowy mountains, but a wonderful wealth of herbal medicines and lush areas that I celebrate daily, even despite this weather. I'd like to pay my respects to any Aboriginal people that may be with us today, and to elders emerging. And so I'm going to start the day today, and I think we've had a wonderful session this week, and we've really been talking about what is wellbeing, and I think many times it can be a little bit misunderstood. And so from my perspective, what I thought I'd do is I'd take you through a process where I'd do a parallel but also give you the reflections of the entire workshop. So I think when we start, it's really important to remember that what we've been talking about this is all of the week is a focus on purpose and our values as people. So I think from my perspective, we'll start there, but let's have a little look, if my button's going to work, okay, at some of the reflections. Starting with Shane Fitzsimmons, And now I've had the privilege of working directly with Shane at Resilience New South Wales, but also through the bushfires. And he was realistically talking about why your well-being is more important than ever. And I think it's really important to reflect on the concepts that Shane spoke to. And he particularly talked about how much people need to belong. Shane, for a long time, was the head of the Rural Fire Service, but also the head of resilience. And, belonging becomes a way of life. And particularly when we look at people who wear uniforms, that uniform then instills in us a sense of responsibility, a responsibility to community, but it also becomes part of your social identity. It's really important that we're making transitions. So when we leave our services, because it is a difficult time, all change is difficult and creates positive and negative reactions in us. But that's normal. And so as a result of that, it's really important to remember, don't be too hard on yourself during that period. We all worry about not being the right fit for the new role when we transition. Shane worried about it. I think the key to that is that we're all very critical of ourselves and our performance because we're used to being on show, and we subsequently devalue our skills that we've learned through the military or through the first response arrangements. We devalue those as something that can only be applied in those scenarios. The biggest lesson that I learned when I left the services and government more particularly is that I worked through what my values were and went, okay, my key value is about helping others. And subsequently, that was a service provision. So if I'm helping others or delivering a service, I was able to come to peace with the fact that I was transitioning away from where I'd been previously. Those periods create lots and lots of uncertainty, and it's okay to have anxiety about it. But it's really important to reach out and get help if you're struggling with that anxiety. Sometimes you don't have to reach out to professionals, and that's one of the things that come through later in our assessments. But one of the things we have to do is just take stock of who we are and know yourself. And when you think you might need to go and talk to somebody, reaching out, all of these phrases that people apply to, well-being, we tend to sort of resist them because we apply that other label, that other stigma, the thing that we don't want to say, and that's called mental health. It's really important to go, okay, it's okay to talk, because by letting it spill out of myself, I'm getting that out of my bucket. Just really important that we do that. I'm going to say that one of the biggest things that I can say to anybody is that we are our strongest critics and we devalue our skills. So please, 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 when it comes to transitioning to a different role, come and talk to us. I've offered to donate to help with some capability matching so that we can show you just how many skills you've walked away from your service industry with. It's something that I've done for years when I've mentored others to go forward, and I've seen people come from frontline responders to senior managers in government agencies now just by taking them through this process. So, I'd welcome the opportunity for you to participate there. Just excuse me a minute while I try and manipulate my screen. We move on now to our second speaker, was Dr. Erin Smith, and she was talking to us all about proactive wellbeing, making sure that we look after ourselves before it hurts. We don't really want to have to, if we talk about prevention is better than cure, well, wellbeing is all about prevention, about being proactive, because the cure can be painful. It can be long. It doesn't necessarily have to be a long recovery. And that's another part of the stigma that we all hold, is that it's I'm broken. I really dislike the term broken. Beautiful porcelain can be broken and turned into absolutely pieces of work they're called mosaics. they've taken a different form, but it doesn't mean to say that you're broken. So please delete broken out of your language. Dr. Smith talked about trauma exposure can be direct, it can be indirect, or it can be cumulative. And I think the cumulative injury was really particularly interesting for me because she used the terminology, it's fundamentally the cost of bearing witness to other people's suffering. And I find now that even after I've left my frontline service, that when I'm dealing with people in their end of life issues, I still cry. I cry for them. I cry more for their families because I know what it's going to feel like to lose somebody. And so making sure that it's all dignified. So I think that cumulative cost of bearing witness to other people's suffering is one that's probably been really undervalued from an employer perspective and something that is probably really quite significant. And then the other piece and the other theme that's been coming out this week is also the potential for moral injury. Dr. Smith was also fabulous in flagging that we, as a collective in the first response and veterans agencies, apply as much stigma to mental health issues as the rest of society. We are reflective of a broader society. And as a result of that, because of that self-stigmatization, that inhibits us from going and seeking assistance. You know, my role as a senior manager, what happens if I said to somebody, I'm not coping? Or that would they remove me from my role, the role that I love doing, the role that I was really good at doing? Or would they let me stay and support me? And most of us would obviously have the belief, I won't speculate on whether it's correct or incorrect, but we have the belief that you'll be set aside because of you've flagged a weakness. I think it's really critical to remember from my perspective, I recognise that that stress that I was going through and that I needed help, and was able to lean on somebody in the background to make sure that I got the help that I needed at the time. One of the things that I was left really delighted about was this talk from Dr. Smith about the use of psychological first aid, and the Australian Red Cross uses a concept of look, listen, and link, and three simple words for all of us to remember. If we see something or someone with a problem, lean into them. And that just means to go and listen to them and hear what they're saying. Listen, hear, and then make sure that you link them to the right services to get some assistance. One of the key things about that linkage, particularly if you're talking to a colleague or a friend who has those issues at a given time, it's really important to make sure that you walk with them. And then remembering that clarity is kind. So when I talk about kindness, don't be afraid just to be honest about what it is that you're seeing and that you say so that they know. Steve McDowell, disappointing that we didn't get to hear from him, but his presentation will be videoed and will be available at a later date. But we had Alison Walters come. Now, Alison, what a woman. She was talking about how women can thrive in frontline roles. And I think, you know, here she was, a mother of 5, a grandmother to another 3, a really remarkable woman with a fabulous career. But she flagged something that was really interesting for me, and that was we rarely get acknowledged for helping others. Now, in the services, you get medals. There's a whole range of things that are available to people, but and there are awards, but it's really not that sort of acknowledgement that we're talking about, because while a high-profile incident might get that acknowledgement, you never get acknowledged for just reaching out and supporting a colleague. Why is that? It's probably one of the most valuable things that we can do. I once recall at the beginning of my paramedic career, a doctor saying to me, the best thing you can do in your career is to ease suffering. Now, that doesn't matter if it's a physical suffering or a mental suffering. So, you know, that is the most powerful thing you can do for anybody. Some other concepts that Alison spoke to was self-doubt. Self-doubt doesn't mean stop doing. It just means stretch yourself. Um, I think it's really easy to go, I can't do this. Well, reframe yourself and say, well, what can I do? And that will give you the opportunity to see whether or not you can stretch to a new position. I think it's really important as we have walked through the week as well that we really are starting to learn that people thrive when you understand your values. You know, if Alison raised three key words, she said clarity, courage, and community. And I think clarity was about understanding your purpose and your vision. Courage was about being prepared to speak up for what you believe in. And community was about the people that surround you and support you to be able to continue doing what it is that you do. And like Shane, Alison also really connected to this concept of you need a tribe to survive, and whether it's friends or colleagues. And certainly one of her strategies was to get to conferences to make sure that she was linking with like-minded people to be able to learn lessons and stay connected. And then finally this morning, if you had the opportunity to be at the session with Mark Layson, well, I'll tell you one thing, that probably one of the best sessions I've heard in a long time. And he was speaking about moral injury, what it is and how we can prevent it. And I think if we talk about moral injury specifically, we're talking about when there's a betrayal of what is right by someone in a legitimate authority or in a high stakes situation. And I think, we can all sort of reflect and look at, what's clashed with our actual values, and has it made a difference to me? He also talked about the differences between moral injury and PTSD. And I thought that was really helpful because a lot of people are confusing, the two, and they can go hand in hand by all means. But certainly when you're talking about that moral injury, it sort of sits in the domain of being not fair. It's been an insult to my personal values, as opposed to PTSD, which is it's not safe, like the flashbacks to having a gun held at you. So, and please remember, reach out and get help if any of this triggers you at all. I think the best lesson listening to Mark for me even was that moral injuries nibble away at us over time, and we can be completely oblivious to the fact that it's happening. And I think one of the descriptors that he used was talking about cynicism, how we become cynical with our workplace after a period of time, and generally more than 5 years. And he said resentment is a personalized cynicism. And that resentment, that cynicism, that internal cynicism is the stuff that eats us and doesn't allow us to move on and to grow. And in order to be able to move forward, one needs to forgive. And that's really an interesting concept because you think about forgiveness and it means, oh, am I giving in? But forgiveness is not about reconciliation. It's about something that we do in our own hearts, forgiving somebody for stuff that they may have done to us in the past. So I think all really valuable insights from our speakers, and I think it's been a fabulous week. So then, of course, you get landed with me. And I start to talk about this lighthouse. And I think The picture on the screen reflects why I'm today going to be talking about a lighthouse, and I want to make this quite personal because, if you look at the lighthouse, I'm actually completely fascinated by them. My father was a mariner at times, and he had such an obsession with lighthouses. I never really understood it until after he was gone, but he even made them as letterboxes over the years. But um, a lighthouse has a clear purpose. And yeah, it's to emit light. It's to show people the way. Um, it protects and guides people. That's really interesting, isn't it? Because I can see some parallels here. If I'm talking about having a clear purpose, when you're a first responder, you come into an organisation because you've got some values and beliefs. And that role gives you the opportunity to deliver on those values and beliefs through that combined purpose. And when we talk about protecting and guiding people, that's fundamentally at the crux of whatever each of you have done in your careers. Um, it frequently exists in the presence of danger. The lighthouse stands alone on the rock. It doesn't mean to say that we need to be alone, and I'll come back to that in my summation shortly. Um, but it does stand in the face of danger at times. However, a lighthouse is also a really solidly anchored structure. It's anchored to rock. It's not standing in sand. It's into rock. Rock is going to give it the stability that it needs. Family and friends give us the stability that we need. Colleagues give us the stability. Our tribe gives us that stability. It is designed for strength and stability and can withstand those waves. And I think, I worked within ambulance for, in excess of 35 years and, in a variety of different roles, obviously. But we get exposed to things that people probably shouldn't see and can't even comprehend. And I think that that's what I'm talking about with the stability and those strong waves. The volume of work, the number of exposures that you have, but at the end of the day, you're still here, you're still standing, you're surviving. Even if it's surviving, it's an opportunity to start thriving. And I guess that the other thing about a lighthouse is that it is bright and shines far and provides reassurance. And I think that our roles as first responders over the years, we've all done that. We've all been there to shine brightly and to provide safety and reassurance for those people that we've been protecting. So I think from an interesting perspective, people don't often notice or think about a lighthouse until they actually need it. And that's exactly what happens with us. First responders, veterans, people don't think about it. It's just one of those things in the background. They don't understand. But as soon as it comes to the forefront of their mind, whether it's a car accident that happens, a heart attack in their home with a loved one, or whether it's the threat of political, civil unrest in other locations, that's the time at which we actually start to recognise the fact that we need our lighthouses. So I guess the reason for the lighthouse analogy was to say that there are just so many similarities in what it is that we've been talking about this week. And so I think, and can I do this here actually? I think from my perspective, I will go to questions, but with the final summation, I'll just leave that slide there for you for the moment. But for the final summation, I would say, from my perspective, the key themes of this week's summit have been the importance of knowing yourself and or your loved one and understanding what truly supports well-being. It's important for us to educate our loved ones on what well-being is because they're not going to these well-being summits. and we need to share that. Second key thing that I think came out for me is that where we sit at any given point in time will require reevaluation of our well-being to ensure that we care for ourselves. And I think about that in the context of where you are at your life interval. And, I'm preparing to retire. And so I'm selling some property, and it's really quite stressful. And it's kind of like, okay, that's another reason to check your well-being. It's an exciting period, but it's also coming with its own stressors. And then I think really finally, everyone needs a tribe. And first responders and veterans need to connect with their peers and create their own culture of care, built on honesty, open dialogue, and permission to speak and be heard. And I think honesty, open dialogue, that permission to speak or to be heard are the most critical factors that we could talk about in the place of well-being. So I might leave it there, and I will stop sharing my screen. Danae, if we've got questions.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Rosemary. That was a lot to cover, and I think you did admirably. It's incredible how those themes, to your point, both within each presentation, but also the themes of the week really stand out and resonated in so many of the different talks. So thank you for capturing that so eloquently. I guess one of the questions that's come up is how do we keep purpose at the center when everything else is changing and starting to shift? It's the structure, the routine, the identity are so much part of your purpose and your identity. And then how do we hold on to that and keep it central while everything else is shifting?
That's a fabulous question. I think realistically, you have to go back. It's coming back to that piece where we have to reframe and check with ourselves. So we need to know ourselves. We need to know what our values and beliefs are so that we can actually align our purpose to where our job sits. Now, I found that one of the jobs that I was doing no longer aligned with my purpose. And it certainly didn't align with my values. And so when that started to happen, I had to really seriously think about it and go, right, it's time to change, because you're actually going to be happier in a place where you're aligning your values and purpose to what you do. So it's just coming back constantly and checking and going, does it still fit or doesn't it fit? And really, it's incredibly difficult to go, I'm going to be leaving that role. But when you can really safely, hand on heart, say, that's not the role that I love the best, it does make it a little bit easier.
Yeah, especially with that recognition and that honesty to know that it's not the role you used to love, and it's served its purpose, but it's time to move on. Yeah, it's tough to have that conversation sometimes with yourselves. And I think, to your point, raising the importance of the open dialogue and the ability, as we heard throughout the week, of others and our family and loved ones to actually say and be able to have a safe, open conversation where, is this really still the job you loved? I'm seeing from everything you're telling me and the way your well-being's feeling is that it's no longer what it once was. And so, I think that is really important. And I feel my question to you is, how do people have that honest conversation and create an environment where they can honestly reflect safely to their loved one on what they're seeing, in order to make them aware that maybe their well-being is suffering?
That's also a great question, Danae. And I think one of the things that I'm watching at the moment, sometimes when we love a job so much, we create excuses for why we love it and are surviving. I love this part of my job, but I hate that, and I'm not going to put up with that. But I love this part, and I hate. And so it's about taking the time and seeing and hearing that sort of dialogue from somebody that you can go, help me understand why you started in that job. Help me understand what's that piece about there. And I think just working with people it's about triggering their own thinking as opposed to saying you're being an idiot. You clearly don't like it. It's about saying, well, how can I get you to actually come to the conclusion that you're ready to leave?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a way that really supports their growth and understanding and transition, to your point, rather than just your observations. Wonderful. Rosemary, one of the other questions that's come through is whether you could please share a little bit more about the capability framework and the workshop that hopefully we'll put on in the near future around that. And I would be happy I'll post in the chats as well the link to that capability framework while you're speaking to it.
Lovely. Thanks, Donna. So the capability framework comes from New South Wales government, and it's probably, quite frankly, been misused a lot, simply because people go, oh, this is the tick and flick piece. Having said that, the workshop we plan to walk people through is, and I wouldn't recommend to anybody to go on and do the self-assessment the way they've got it set on the capability framework, but come to the workshop and see how to do it properly. And that capability framework will then actually walk you through and show you exactly how many skills you do have. And I think many years ago, somebody said to me, Rosemary, you don't say a lot, but when you do speak, you just nail it. And that's realistically one of those soft skills that exists within the capability framework. And in emergency service and veteran organisations, people have valued the physical skills. They've valued the leadership. They haven't wanted to talk to soft skills, and it's the soft skills that you have more of than you're aware. And that's what I really want to flag, because that's what other industries, government, private industry are absolutely looking for.
You're so right. And it's one of those essential skills that so often brings a very disparate and diverse team together to agree, when somebody like you can sit back and look at all the threads. And that's why you were the perfect choice for wrapping up this week, because you have this incredible ability to listen very attentively and then pull out the threads that really bind. And I do agree. I think that is an essential leadership skill and an essential team skill, and greatly undervalued. Wonderful. Well, Rosemary, unfortunately, we're out of time, and thank you again so much for your wonderful support this week. Rosemary, as you can tell, has been on every webinar this week and has participated despite extreme weather and events and lack of electricity, and having to start up her generator and chainsaw her way out of her home in the snow mountains. So thank you, Rosemary. We truly
Thanks, Donna.
Appreciate you and all the skill, the passion, and commitment you have. And thank you for being such a lifelong friend to Wellbeing Australia. Thank you also to our participants for joining us today. And before we close, we just want to remind you that if anything we've discussed today or during this week has triggered anything in you or a loved one, please know that you are not alone. And we'll leave a slide up at the end of the session today that you might want to take a screenshot of, or something like that, just with supportive services in case somebody or you yourself need some support. As I mentioned earlier, a recording of this session will be available shortly at both wellbeingaustralia.com.au and also firstresponderwellbeingsummit.com.au. And on behalf of the team, thank you again for being part of the 2025 First Responder and Veteran Wellbeing Summit. And we really hope that you'll give us your feedback at the end of the session so that we can continue to deliver things of value to you. Thanks so much, Rosemary. Have a lovely day.